Let's shift the paradigm to prioritize our peace and focus on the positive while creating balance to make living our best life the ultimate goal. We'll talk boundaries, self-care, mental health, and overcoming obstacles. You'll hear interviews and fresh perspectives to support you along the way. Let's elevate the conversation and level up our self-growth game. This is the Piece of Me podcast. Hi friends, it's Lexy Lee. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new, then welcome back and thanks for coming back to the podcast. Now, this time of year is full of commercials pushing weight loss programs, influencers in your feed showing off body goals, and the gyms are packed with people who want to shed some extra lbs. Now, the pressure to transform this time of year, it's not a surprise. It's kind of expected. But not everyone feels the need to change. Now, what if you don't want that added pressure? What if you're already working on feeling good in the body you currently have? Now, today's conversation is a little bit different. Actually, it's a lot different. Kristen from the A Little Bit A Lot podcast joins me to talk about being confident in her bigger body and why losing weight is not one of her New Year's resolutions. It's a refreshing conversation because she talks about being confident and being body positive. And she talks about the unhealthy mental toxicity that exists to lose weight and the pressure she got from her family from a really young age. She also talks about choosing to accept herself as is and choosing to be happy. Now, in today's episode, at a time when it seems like the focus is all about what to lose, Kristen shares all there is to gain. So let's take a listen. Hi, Kristen. Welcome to the Piece of Me podcast.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for inviting me. I love your show.
Well, thank you. And I love yours, which is the A Little Bit A Lot podcast, which is going to be linked below. So I'm excited to have you here because we talked a little bit offline and we have some really good stuff to talk about, especially with the new year being underway and all the pressures that come with, trying to be a size whatever and, trying to lose weight and all that good stuff. So before we get into that though, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Yes. Well, I'm, like you mentioned, the host of the A Little Bit A Lot podcast. Again, my name's Kristen. I just started my podcast around 3 months ago. So, of course, you guys can feel free to check that out. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Of course, I'm going to have, the Instagram and the TikToks linked below at A Little Bit A Lot podcast. And yeah, I just really want my show to just be, a welcoming community to where people can just be vulnerable, to be themselves, focus on mental health, body positivity, self-acceptance. So we're rocking and rolling and I've really been enjoying it and like getting to meet people like you. The podcast community is just so welcoming. So I've been having a blast.
It is. It's so fun. And for the listeners listening right now, I've been following Kristen for a while and she has such great content and, it's all about that, the positivity and the mental health and just supporting people through this thing we call life. So It's all good stuff. So one of the things, I was listening to one of your episodes, as I mentioned, offline, and I love, now you call yourself plus sized and I thought, there's so much pressure in the beginning of the year to feel like your New Year's resolution has to be to lose weight or to look a certain way or to join the gym or insert, health thing here. So can you kind of tell us about your experience growing up plus sized and a little bit also about do you feel the pressures of a new year to be any type of way?
Right. I think that is really tied into the growing up plus size experience. Like that New Year's resolution, when that comes around, you are going to feel the pressure. And I think that really stems from my mom, first and foremost, because my mom has been a really big stickler about New Year's resolutions. It almost always was, I want to lose weight. I remember when we got our very first treadmill, my mom put it in the basement when we used to still have our old house. And I'm like, okay, well, I see her doing this. I want to do it. So that has always been like the biggest pressure for me. And then I think that once you put that pressure on yourself and then the next new year comes around and you're like, well, didn't get that goal the way I wanted to, then it's just like so devastating. And I have like really had such a hard time up until recently facing that, accepting the fact that it's like, this is just the body that I've been given. This is just the body that I'm in. There's nothing wrong with that. And a day on the calendar year should not make me feel pressure to all of a sudden become anew and be something that I'm not. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's just such a silly thing. And then especially like when you're watching like the New Year's Rockin' Eve, you always see it's sponsored by Planet Fitness. So then everyone's just like, all right, January is going to be the craziest time of the year
Yep.
for the gym. And it's just like, no shade to Planet Fitness or anything like that with the organization, but it's just like, oh man, like sometimes that can just be viewed as so toxic because it's
Mm-hmm.
like, why does that have to equate to weight? I would rather much focus my
Mm-hmm.
goals on just, self care, self love, moving on, in a different direction. So
Yeah,
that has been a
absolutely.
really big thing for me, like always focusing on the weight goal when it comes to New Year's. And I had to free myself of that a couple of years ago and realize like that's just not good.
But how did you get there though? Like how, you said you've been dealing with it since you were young, you're a kid and kind of just like, you get the treadmill in the house, mom just, it's kind of your environment. So how did you like break out of that environment and get that perspective of, I don't want to do this anymore. Like this is my body, this is what it is. But how did you get there?
I would say the number one thing for me was therapy. Therapy. I always talk about this on my show, how therapy has really been such a big tool for me. And once I started therapy and I realized that, like, hey, you don't have to keep putting this pressure on yourself. And my therapist always talks to me about radical self love. That's one thing that she, like, always stresses to me every single time I, go into the zone where I feel like I'm feeling pressure on my weight. Because at the end of the day, I'm not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes like you have people who celebrate body positivity and you think that they always feel this way, but it's like at the end of the day, I am human. There are going to be some times where I do feel a little bit insecure about it. But going into therapy, I realized that it's like, hey, like that's not really nice that, some people in my family are making comments about my body and things like that. And I'm just like, that really, you're right. Like that is exhausting. I don't want to keep up with this anymore. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
have to keep feeling like I have to wear this shapewear and these uncomfortable garments
Yes,
all the
absolutely.
time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was the turning point for me once I like got in therapy and she was like, yeah, you don't have to feel that way. I'm like, oh,
It's funny too, because I was listening to your episode on your podcast, and you were talking about, people making comments about your weight,
yeah,
and I'm sure people, I always like to think that I want to give people the benefit of the doubt that they do it with good intentions. They maybe, they want us all to be healthy, they want what's best for us, whatever. But I thought about it, like we don't walk up to people, like especially with women. My show's predominantly women, but we don't walk up to a woman and say, your roots are showing. You need to go color your hair. We don't say, hey, your clothes are out of style. You need to go shopping, right? Like we would
exactly.
never do that. Like how you wear your hair is up to you. How you choose to dress is up to you. Why do we say that with people's body? You know what I mean?
Right. And I think that's one thing that I was really thinking about, before when I thought about my feelings on self love and acceptance and how you treat others. Because there's a YouTube video that I watched that was called 4 Steps to Improve Your Body Image from a channel called Therapy in a Nutshell. And she had a therapist on there that mentioned that if we did, like you said, had someone that talked to us the way that we talk about our bodies and our heads, you wouldn't want to be around that person because they'd be considered abusive. So why do we keep feeling comfortable saying that to ourselves?
That's a
So
good
that's
point.
something that I've had to like establish, boundaries with my family to say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, look, I don't feel comfortable when you point out my stomach rolls and say I need to do sit-ups. I don't feel comfortable with you pointing out, this certain insecurity of mine because at the end of the day, like you have to realize that it's okay. It's not the end of the world. Our bodies get us through everything that we need to get through. And for that, we should be grateful rather than bash it. So those conversations have been really difficult that I've had to have, but I think that it's at the end of the day been beneficial because it's helped my mom kind of shift the way that she views herself, even because she didn't realize, like, yeah, you were doing it because, like you said, you were just trying to have my best interest, but it's
Mm-hmm.
actually harmful. And if anything, it's just a form of projection because that's how you feel about your body. So let's
Yes.
change the narrative. So I think that that's kind of the era that I'm in. It's like breaking the
Mm-hmm.
generational curses era and letting my mom know that those things are not okay.
Yeah, for sure. Now, how many times, like you say that, you're putting this boundary in place with your own family, which is so hard to do. I mean,
Yeah.
how many times did you probably have to say that for your mom to understand it? Like, was it hard for you to put that boundary in place? And did they were they shocked that you put that in place? Like, how did they react to that?
That's tough. That's one thing that I always want to let, the audience know too, that creating boundaries is not an easy thing. And if you are willing to go through this journey and you're not going to go no contact with this person and you're willing to keep this person in your life and try to educate, it's going to take time because not everybody's doing the work that you're doing for you. Not everybody's going to be in therapy. Not everybody, has the same views. So you have to be patient with them and teach them that. So it's going to be a lot of repeating yourself. I think I've had to talk to my mom about it probably like 4 times already.
Mm-hmm.
Each time she doesn't have to, hey, remember I said I don't want you to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it takes quite some time, but if you care to continue to still have that relationship in your life, you just have to remember that it comes with patience. And at the end of the day, though, if they're showing that they're just going to continue to not try to at least make an effort to respect the boundary, then you have to go from there, deciding what you want to do as far as the communication goes. But in my case, my mom is open to understanding and being kind about it. So
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a
but you
really
just
good
can't
point.
expect her to just all of a sudden, after something she's been doing for what, I'm 27 years, to
Mm-hmm.
just go away after a couple of conversations. Because that's, deep rooted toxicity that's embedded in us
Absolutely.
with society.
Yep. And it's a different generation, your mom too. So she, maybe grew up with a different concept or perspective. And then you have yours and you're, like you said, you're trying to put your foot down and kind of like change the narrative. So that's not easy to do. And I also think too, it makes me think of, the saying that we teach people how to treat us. So what we
Yes.
allow, right? Like what we allow is saying like, that's okay, that we're willing to be, treated or talked to a certain way. So by you saying, yeah, that doesn't work for me anymore. Like, don't talk to me like that. Like, don't point that out or don't say this in front of somebody else. Like, you're just saying, this is the respect I'm willing to accept, and this is what I'm not willing to accept. So that was a really
Yeah, and
good
I think
point.
that's really been tough for me because even like outside of the body conversation, just in general, just like morals as it is, I've had a tough time communicating that with my family. Like right now, I'm kind of going no contact with another family member, and my mom doesn't really get it. So then she's like, "Well, are you sure you don't want to?" And I'm like, "No, I am very assertive with my opinion. I do not want this person around because it's like we're only on this planet for so long. I do not want to spend it being around people who don't make me feel good about myself." And I've heard comments of the grapevine that this person was like, well, with this generation, you cut them off. And I mean, you say something and they're done with you for life. And it's like, didn't know how I felt about that comment at first, but I'm going to own it. Yeah. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't treat me right, I will cut you off. Because you
Yeah.
have to put your mental health and your boundaries first. And if they're not willing to compromise on that, it's your choice.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, because like, I find myself in a very similar position as you that, when you do decide, certain friendships or relationships no longer serve you because of boundaries being crossed or toxic relationships or whatever, or people just kind of grow and go in different, directions. Sometimes you can find yourself like, oh, like you miss those people, but it's like, and maybe there's fewer people in your life because of that too, and you start kind of not tolerating certain situations or certain conversations anymore. It's like, it does feel different, right? Like you said, like that's a
Right.
family member who, mom wants you to talk to them and you're like, yeah, that's okay. That's tough,
Yeah, it
but
really is.
yeah, but it's part of it. So, okay, let's one of the things you mentioned too when you were talking about the therapy is you said your therapist talks about something called radical self-care or radical self-love. That's what it
Yes.
was. Radical self-love.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
That's something that I'm like still trying to figure out. But I think that I've given it kind of my own definition, and that just means loving yourself endlessly. Because I literally just had a session with her earlier, and she reminded me about this again, where it's like she's constantly pouring into me that you have to put yourself first, put your boundaries first, and you can't be focused too much on what other people are saying. So for my personal journey, that's what it's been about, is making sure that, because like even with starting this podcast, I was so concerned about what people were going to think, what people were going to, say about my appearance or my weight or things like that. Because when it comes to being plus size, sometimes it can be tough because society, traditionally is not too kind to bigger bodied people. So that was something that I was really concerned about. But when it comes to that radical self love, if you know yourself and you respect yourself, that outside noise shouldn't matter. So that's kind of just what we've been focused on with my journey. And I think that sharing that with people can help, because I know it's such a personalized thing. Self love, self care,
Mm-hmm.
it's just so individualized. I'm
Mm-hmm.
learning. I thought it was just this whole like general abstract thing, but I didn't realize how intricate it can be, because everyone loves
Mm-hmm.
themselves and loves things around them so differently. So,
That's true. That's true.
yeah.
Yeah. And something else you said in your episode about growing up plus size, like you talked a lot about even just, it's something that, I mean, so many women struggle with their weight. I mean, this is something that I feel like, like the diet culture and, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry for a reason, because, whether it's Planet Fitness or, whatever health gym, it's something that we're all like, trying to achieve, like that number on the scale or looking a certain way or being a certain size, or thinking we have to be a certain way. And it's just like this never ending struggle that I think so many women have. So you talked about, growing up plus size and even shopping. Like that was something that was really interesting. You were saying how, shopping with friends that, uh, you might go into the same store with your friends who might not, they might be a different size than you are. And that
Right.
because there wasn't a lot of stuff available, that you would be buying jewelry and they're buying clothes. And you're like, this is getting old. Like I want to go to the same store with my friends if we're going, shopping. And because you can't find something in your size, or they don't offer your size, you're walking
Mm-hmm.
out with a pair of earrings and a necklace and your friends are like, look at the cute shirt I got. And I thought, that's such a great point of, maybe the lack of inclusivity or, of including all the sizes and all the different body shapes, and like that had to be hard. And I don't know if you can speak more to that, but that was just something that I thought, there's so much you said that was relatable for women.
Yeah, because I hadn't really thought about that until I brought it up on the fly in the episode. And I'm just like, that was a major part of it. Because like I said, in my era, we grew up to where like putting emphasis on Hollister, Aeropostale. If you think about the branding of that company in general, you're going to walk by and you're going to see some guy sitting out there with abs
Yep.
washboard abs and some shorts on, standing outside. You go in, everyone's going to be a size 0. Before then, I didn't even know that was a thing, which, no shaming the people who are smaller. We love everyone with all sizes, but I'm just like, oh my goodness. Like, as a child, that was
Mm-hmm.
a very overwhelming experience, because you are quite literally seeing these brands gain in popularity during the time where I'm the most impressionable age in middle school. And this
Mm.
is what I'm given. This is what people my age are flocking to, and this is
Mm-hmm.
what's hot. And you always want to follow the trends when you're young. You're in middle
Yep.
school. You just want to hang with your friends, have fun, and feel included. So for
Mm-hmm.
that to be the height of the popularity, and that's what this brand is giving us, is just this specific type of image, and you don't fit that, it was very, very isolating, because I'm like, I do not look like any of the people in these campaigns. I don't even look like any of the people who even work in this store. So how do I expect them to make anything for me. So of course you go in and like you said, there's nothing. And I mentioned in my episode, we had Forever 21. That was very popular at the time. But the one that I had at my mall didn't have a plus size section. So I'd have to drive 40 minutes away to the other mall that does have a plus size section. But the section that they had was still minimal. So it's like, I'm lucky to get a sweater. I'm lucky to get a t-shirt. I know for sure I can't fit their jeans. So then it's like, you just have to make it work with what you can. And then in the meantime, when I'm not with my friends, my mom's like, all right, let's go to Penny's. And we go to the women's section, and I'm like, oh my God, I look like I already have 2 kids and I'm in 6th grade.
Oh my gosh, yes, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was like, it was really, really difficult. I feel like that's a part of growing up that I have not personally seen a lot of plus size girls talk about. Like, yeah, it's easier now, but what about that struggle when we were younger? Because during that time, that's what was pushed on us. I mean, even with like Victoria's Secret, I can't go in there and get any bras. I can't go in there and get the pink brand that was popular. I wanted to get a pink hoodie so badly, but did they have a 3X? No. So I had to be like, all right, I'll just get some perfume because we know Victoria's Secret has like cute perfume. They have the lotions, and that's all I could leave with. So that sucked. I for sure always smell good though. So.
Oh my gosh, that is too funny. But it's not funny. I mean, it's, you're making it funny. But, it's amazing. Like now you do see, speaking of Victoria's Secret, now you do see different body types, which is like, I mean, we've come such a long way. And I used to hear stories. I'm not trying to badmouth or, bash any brands here, but there was something about Victoria's Secret, like not too long ago, about like what the models had to go through and, what was expected of them, to kind of have that image and have that look for like the runway and for the catalogs. But that's a great point that, that was just how you grew up and that's what you saw. And as you were talking about the guy with the washboard abs, I don't think I ever went to school with any guys that had washboard abs ever. I don't think I ever remember that.
Me either. The guys that were my age definitely didn't look like that. Like I went to the same school where we grew up from 1st grade up until 8th grade graduation together. So it's like, I saw him when he went through puberty, boogers in his nose, and that's not what this guy looks like next to me.
Exactly.
So
but
it's like,
yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting too, because I feel like, again, going back to the whole, like, this is such a struggle for women, but like men, I know some men, I've talked to other men on this podcast about having struggles with body image and body weight, but why is it though that, I feel like us women, like I'm just curious if you have any thoughts. I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but why are women so hung up on looking a certain way or looking what they think is ideal? But I feel like men, not all of them, but some men, they don't deal with this, they're not feeling that pressure. Why is that?
Yeah, I don't even know. Like that was something that I seriously struggled with when I was, growing up, because I have always had that pressure just because like, since I was plus size, I mentioned that I was, even in cheerleading. Getting my cheerleading outfit alone, my uniform was difficult. It's not like I could pre-order them. They were hand-me-downs. So whoever wore them last season, you just get that uniform and that's yours to take care of for the season. She's looking through. She can't find a big enough size. That's humiliation at its finest. But then you've got the male jerseys. Those are automatically baggy. So it's not like the guys ever really have to worry about that. Like even in sports, there is still such a difference in accessibility in clothing when it comes even down to the uniforms. Because I've literally had like some friends who were males who were plus size and they didn't have that issue when he was on the basketball team and I was on the cheerleading team at the same time. And I'm like, okay, well, you got your uniform easily because they're bigger, baggier. And then I'm like, I'm squeezing into mine. It felt like it was so unfair during the time. So that was difficult. But I do know, like, at the end of the day, I don't want to take away from, like you said, the male experience, because I've been listening to this other podcast called Good Children with Andrew Joe, and they grew up, living the plus size male experience as well. And they've talked about having these similar issues, them not being able to fit in, the Aeropostales and the Hollisters and stuff. So it was a thing because they're around, my age as well. But for the most part, at least in my experience, in my immediate surroundings, not too many people dealt with it. So
Mm-hmm. And I
in
still
that
feel like
moment when you
even,
don't see that, you feel isolated.
yeah, for sure. And I'm going to take this like a step further. Like we're talking so much about like growing up. This makes me think about dating. Like maybe I'm going too far with this, but I think about women who feel like they have to look a certain way to land their future husband or land their future wife and, land their lifelong partner. And again, I don't really feel like guys, like there's like the dad bod, right? The dad bod is sexy, but like, is the
Right.
mom bod I don't know. Like, I feel like women don't get that same leniency that men have. Like, men can rock a dad bod and it's cute, and women are like, yeah, it's cool with us. Whereas, like,
Exactly.
right? But men, I don't know. I feel like maybe they are more accepting, and it's just, I don't know. Maybe it's getting better, but
No, I
it's funny because
agree.
it kind
I
of,
still feel like it's kind of bad. Like, I
yeah, like
still
it
feel
still
like,
goes.
yeah, I think that there's still a lot of work to be done with those standards because then, like, sometimes even on TikTok alone, you hear these story times and these women are like talking about their ex-husband, shaming them for their mom bods. And it's like, listen, we both put on some pounds after we had kids. What's going on? Why am I the only one being targeted? So
Mhm.
you're right. Like, it still is a big stigma against, women versus dad bods for sure.
Hi, I want to quickly interrupt this episode and check in on you. I have a feeling that you want this year to be better than last, and you want to be living your best life. Did you know that I wrote a book? Okay, well, maybe not a book, but it's a journal. It's called the Piece of Me Journal, just like the podcast, Piece of Me. Now, if you've picked up a new planner or a calendar for the new year, did you also pick up a journal? If you want to create healthier habits or focus on self-care, you should also have a journal. If you need an outlet to support your mental and emotional health as much as your physical health, you should have a journal. If your goal this year is to prioritize your own needs, then guess what? Yep, a journal will help. The Piece of Me journal was designed to be a piece of you. Inside are wellness exercises, journal prompts, a goal-setting section, inspirational quotes, and over 100 lined pages of free space to daydream and think. I wanted to help you work through whatever is holding you back so you can keep moving forward, so you can focus on the positive when life makes you negative. Journaling is like a really good face mask, but for your soul. You do it a few times a week and you're going to see and feel the difference. The Piece of Me journal is available through my website, peaceofmepodcast.com. That's peaceofmepodcast.com. Now, I'll let you get back to listening, but seriously, stop waiting to make yourself a priority and get yourself the Piece of Me journal. Yeah, it's crazy stuff, crazy stuff. So let's go. So one thing that I'm actually really glad you're going to talk about this, and there's so much to this, like we're going to dive into it, but I want to talk about your experience going to what you've called fat camp. So tell us about
Yes.
that.
Man, it's hard because I feel like I often like disassociate those slightly unpleasant memories. So a lot of times I'll have like glimpses and pieces of it in my mind. But like we were discussing before, I didn't even realize in the moment that it was considered quote unquote fat camp. Up until literally quite like maybe a year ago, my sister and I were talking and she was like, yeah, like that time we went to fat camp. And I'm like, you would consider that fat camp? And it kind of just like sent me into like a crisis moment for a little bit where I'm just like, oh man, like I guess you're right. That was considered fat camp. But I've always said like fortunately my experience wasn't horrible. I know some other people have been put in that situation where they've gone to fat camp and felt, really bad about it. The people that were there, weren't kind. It wasn't a good experience. But in my case, like I had an okay time. Once we went, I think my grandmother actually enrolled me in it because she was always the one putting us in these shenanigans. And once we got there, we just
Grandma,
like,
come on.
yes, like we learned about like healthy eating. So, it wasn't like too awful. They talked to us about like changing our relationship with food, having, a healthier relationship with it, different substitutions that you can make for snacks, teaching us, what different type of snacks that we can make. Introducing us to different fruits, which was good, and vegetables, because I notoriously was like a picky eater growing up. And I'm like, oh, wow, I think that was the first time I realized I even liked grapes. So simple, but it really
Yeah.
made a big impact. And then we would have like recess, go outside, and they would encourage us to exercise and play games. So my experience personally wasn't that bad, because the people that were there really focused on, the positivity of it, and never really mentioned weight. It was more just focusing on your relationship with food, how food can fuel your body, give you the nutrients that you need to get through the day. So I think the way that they, orchestrated the program made it feel like a little bit more of a positive experience for me. But I know not every program is that way. So, because it's like, I have a friend who went, and their experience was totally different in a different program. Theirs was like constantly bashing their bodies, which was like totally inappropriate. And their parents found out and was just like, this is not what I signed up for. They constantly had to like work out the whole time. They went to this little, community children's center gym, were on the treadmill, doing this and that and the other. And I'm like, geez, like, mine was fun. That sounds like a nightmare.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it wasn't that bad, but when I look back at it, I'm just like, ooh, like, would I, if I was a parent, would I want to put my kid through something like that? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out my feelings about it. Just for the fact that, like, I just really processed that it was fat camp.
Well, that's kind of like, as you're saying this, that was one of the thoughts I had, is you grew up growing up, you lived with both your mom and your dad. Is that correct?
Yeah, I lived with my mom and dad up until 8th grade when they got their divorce. And then I lived with my grandma for a couple of years until my mom got us our own apartment.
Gotcha. Because I was just thinking, like, how did your grandma kind of like trump your parents? You know what I mean? Like, I'm surprised that your parents didn't say, yeah, we don't really want her to go. Or like, did they have to get permission from your parents? Or did she have to get permission from your parents to let you go there? Like, how did she actually pull that off?
That's just how my life has always been. My grandma has pretty much always trumped my parents. Like, my dad has never really had a say, because my mom and grandma are so close. And my mom's kind of just like, oh, well, she thinks it's good for the kids, so I'll just go with it. And then that's kind of just how things happen. And now that we're older, we're kind of just like, hey, why didn't you say something?
Yeah. That's
my mom's like, you're right. That wasn't really the best decision. I apologize. So she's taking accountability now. But in the moment, she thought like it was good. But now that she looks back at it, she's like, yeah, this, that, and the other probably wasn't the best for me to listen to your grandma on. And I'm like, you think?
Gosh, wow. I mean, at least you're getting the apology. Like you said, that's a big deal. Now,
Exactly.
How old were you when you went to this camp?
I would say I was around 11 years old. I think I was 11.
And then how long was the camp that you were?
It was just for a summer. It was like a couple weeks program.
A couple weeks. Okay.
Yeah. So it wasn't too intense. We went like every day, Monday through Friday, for a couple of hours. And at the end, I got this cute little certificate thing. And I'm like, oh, well, now I like, chicken wraps. And I thought that was cool.
Oh my gosh. I found out I like grapes. So
right. Like, I found out I like a new fruit, and I like salads more. So at the time, I thought it was a positive thing. But now I'm looking back and I'm like, yikes, maybe this could have just been a conversation with my mom, to help. Why did I have to go through the program for this?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And you said it was your sister that just recently kind of mentioned this to you, like, hey, when we were growing up. Now, is your sister older or younger than you?
She's younger than me. We're 3 years and 9 months apart. So she just turned 24, and I'll be 28 in February.
Gotcha. Okay. So she kind of realized, like, hey, you didn't realize that was fat camp back then?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, isn't that interesting?
My sister is so wise. I just feel like in reality, she was meant to be the big sister, because there are so many things that she teaches me and makes me aware of about like our past and our trauma and mental health. And, she's on the spectrum, so she has a really good memory as well. So there's like stuff that I will literally blank out from trauma, like the fat camp. And she'll be like, no, I remember this. And I'm like, why bring it up? Now I have to reprocess this all over again.
Like I was healed, but now I'm not.
Right. Like I completely
uh,
forgot that happened. Thanks, sis. But at least she's willing to like work on it together and we can like discuss our feelings about it together, which helps. Like at least we have the shared trauma bond in that
yeah.
way.
Yeah. And I'm going to be the jerk here that's going to like rehash even more. So, because like, as you're talking, it made me think of something. So, you come out of this quote unquote fat camp with your new certificates, you come home and like, do you remember at all what life was like after camp? Like, was your grandmother any more strict with you about food, or was your mom harder on you about body image? Like, do you remember any of that?
Um, from what I can remember, it was just pretty much the same. She was still strict about food, still didn't like the food choices that we were making, even though I was making a little bit healthier choices. For the most part, I was still eating the same things that I was always eating. So, of
Mm-hmm.
course, I was still getting that judgment. Oh, you guys love that McDonald's, she would always say. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I love a double hamburger. Kill me. I don't know what you want me to
What
say.
kid doesn't, right? Like you're supposed to like that. You're supposed to like candy and,
Exactly. And I feel like at the time, now that I look back at it, it's just like, I was just a kid. Of course,
Yeah.
I'm going to want McDonald's. Like now I look back at my little cousins and I'm like, they get so excited to get a Happy Meal. And I'm like, of course I was. So I think that,
Yep.
looking back, I wish that she would have given me and my sister a lot more grace for that and realized that like we didn't have to go through that experience. You didn't have to be so hard on us about food and our choices. There was a more appropriate way that you could have educated us rather than shaming us, because at the end of the day, like we were just children. So of course we're gonna enjoy those cute little toys that come with the Happy Meal and all those things. So yeah, it was still tough, like up until we moved out, her judging like
Mm-hmm.
every single thing I ate.
Gosh, yeah. And I mean, I can relate to a lot of what you're saying too. I mean, I went through stuff myself as a kid, but it's true. I mean, kids are supposed to like chips and cookies and Happy Meals and fast food. I mean, like that's kind of part, it's part of the course. So I
Right.
want to go back to now, and thank you for sharing all that with the camp. I mean, that's such an experience. Going back to the whole like body positivity. So you mentioned the therapy, and you also talked about how you've done a lot of work on yourself to get where you are now. Do you have any advice or tips for anybody who maybe they are plus size, maybe they aren't, but they just want to be more confident in their own skin? Like, do you have any advice for those people who are kind of trying to get where you are, trying to kind of get to that realization of like, yeah, I don't want to keep fighting this. This is who I am and I want to enjoy life.
I think my advice just would be to like really focus on just loving yourself and loving the skin that you're in. Because the more I say this all the time, but the more I realize that this body has gotten me through my victories, my failures, and all of the above and protected me, I'm just like, wow, like I love it so much. It's kept me healthy. I know there's a big stigma against like overweight people and being unhealthy, but according to my doctor, I'm fine. Like my blood work is okay. And I think that that's a big stigma that people always think. And it's like just because, equating weight to health,
Mm-hmm.
that's not always that. So I think that, focusing on that. And I think that one thing that I would say is like giving yourself affirmations. Since starting my podcast a lot, I have shifted the media that I'm consuming with Instagram mainly, and I've found so many different self help and positive pages like ours where you're giving out, advice on how to give yourself affirmations. Like there's this page called happystrokes.in, and they have body positive affirmations. And this is an example of things that I work through in therapy that I'm always seeing on Instagram. And I'm like, yes, this is it. These are ways that you can, connect with yourself to feel better. And it says, my body is a gift. My arms give the best hugs. My body is strong. My body deserves kindness. My body takes me places. My body deserves respect. I can trust my body. I'm grateful for everything my body helps me do. And the more you think about that and really focus on like, wow, I'm just so thankful that it helps me do all of these things, I think that's what helps me connect more to it and feel,
Mm-hmm.
a lot better about it. So that's just personally what's gotten me through. Like those affirmations truly go a long way, because if you're not going to tell yourself, who else is going to tell you?
It's a great point. Yeah, it's a really great point. And
Exactly.
okay, so you brought up another point. You and I, we have these podcasts where, we really have taken, and I'm still on my own personal self-growth development journey myself, but you have to take the time. You have to work through your stuff. Like I was just talking about this on one of my recent episodes, that you have to work through your triggers and your traumas, and you got to heal, and you got to all this stuff. But if you have somebody, or if somebody listening right now knows somebody else, maybe whoever's listening has done that work and is on their journey, but maybe they know somebody else who needs support. And because I find that if somebody hasn't done that work, it's really hard sometimes to get them to see the light.
Man, I just feel like it's such a personalized experience because you just have to be willing to do it for you. So if you haven't started the work yet, it's really just a matter of at one point, are you going to have enough? Like when are you going to reach your breaking point? If you're okay with not putting in the work right now and you feel like that's fine and you're okay with that, then that's great. But I feel like at some point you're gonna reach your wits end, and only you can dictate when that's time. And I think that was something that I was struggling with, where I had a positive influence in my life, like my sister, who was telling me all these things, but like you said, I hadn't seen the light yet before I started my growth journey and my self acceptance journey. So she's telling me all these things, and I wasn't ready to hear it yet. And it was just a simple matter of when I was ready. It's just something in me clicked where I just had enough. Enough was enough. I'm tired of feeling like this. I'm tired of being so negative on myself. I want to be able to have a more positive outlook, to be a better me, to be a better sister, to be a better friend, to be a better girlfriend, to be a better daughter. And that's ultimately what it came down to. So it's like, it's really tricky to answer that because it's really just when you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a personal experience. But I think, the first step I would always recommend is therapy. You don't have to stick to a consistent routine. Like when I first started, I was so scared. I didn't want to go every week. I was like, I'll talk to you sometimes. So it was like every 2 weeks or once a month. Like people always get scared that taking that first step means that you have to make this super major commitment in the beginning, where it's like, it doesn't have to be all that. You can set the tone for what you want it to be, how often you want to talk, and what you want to talk about and what you don't want to talk about. So I think that's something that people, can keep in mind, where if they're afraid to take that first step, into looking inwards, is like, you set the tone. You don't have to let anyone else set the tone for you. Like those are your boundaries. Just communicate them. Figure out what that even is. So that's another thing to consider.
No, I think that's great. All right. So Kristen, one of the things that we were talking a little bit earlier in this episode about, New Year's resolutions and being plus size and feeling that pressure. But just curious, like, what are your personal resolutions for 2024? Have you started thinking about goals? Like what's in store for you next year?
Man, I've been thinking about it actually. And I think that my goals for the new year are just to continue to just keep doing what I'm doing in 2024. I think a lot of times people are like, I need to just make up all these new things of these different things I want to accomplish, rather than just focusing on, hey, what I'm doing right now works for me, so I'll keep doing that. And I think that's like, sometimes that's okay too. You don't have to always come up with these new goals and these new agendas to continue to reach higher and better, because at the end of the day, it's gonna come. If you feel like you're on the right path and what you're doing is working for you, like everything's going to work out in your favor anyway. So I think, yeah, like just continuing to put myself first, continue to, go to therapy, continue to just be patient with myself, I think is also another goal that I was just thinking about the other week too. And really want to focus on patience, because sometimes I can just get like so worked up with myself to be like, well, why am I not here? Or why haven't I accomplished this yet? But it's like, it's fine. At the end of the day, like, you will be okay. You just have to be patient.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
No, I love that. I love that. And one of the things too that comes with a new year, and you're saying how patience is a great one, but people might be going into 2024 maybe wanting to start their own passion project, or maybe there's something that they want to take a risk on. and it's maybe something that's been in the back of their head, and they're saying, this is the year I want to do something for me. I'm ready to, bring my dream to light, whatever it is. Now, you've just recently, well, I shouldn't say recently, but a few months ago, started your podcast. So I'm curious, as somebody who decided to take this risk or take this leap, because you said you were not sure how people were going to respond or react to you. What advice do you maybe have for people who are kind of maybe on the fence, like they want to do something in 24, but maybe they're still a little bit nervous? So if you have any advice for those people.
My advice would just be, I know it's so mediocre, but just do it. Like, that's the only way that I have gotten through anything I've ever gotten through. And my podcast, I was talking with my dad, the episode that I featured him in, and he was talking about the first time I learned how to ride a bike. I just did it. He looked around and he was like, oh, I see this little girl in pigtails riding down the street. Same thing. I taught myself how to swim because I just got in. And understand, and it does come with risks. I very well could have fell, scraped my knee, possible drowning, like that got dark. Anything can happen. But at the same time, it's like, if it's something you want to do, you already know it's going to come with the risks. But how are you going to appreciate the success if you don't even know the failures, if you don't try? So I know, like, a lot of people just say this, but I feel like you just got to do it. You just have to try to jump in. And, I'm a big advocate, like I said earlier, with, for affirmations. So, a few affirmations that I always tell myself is that, like, I'm okay, even in the presence of some risk and uncertainty. Like, sometimes people feel like it's not going to be all right in the end, but you have to remember that risk and uncertainty, it's always going to be there. So would you rather just live with the fact that you didn't try or that you did try? It's your choice. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you have to also remember that you've overcome hard things in the past and you'll do it again now. So you may as well give it a try. I think that's what got me through once I first jumped into this space. It's like, well, I've conquered everything before, so why won't I be able to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. If fear is always driving you, then it's going to hold you back from so many things. And it's, sure. I mean, I might not be everyone's podcast and, or whatever, but it's, you create something and you go for it and you just do it. Right. So.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's one thing that it's like, I just hate having fear be a driving motivator for me. Mm-hmm. It feels just so, it's limiting. Fear can just put you in such a box where it's just like the idea of the what if it kills me. So I'm just like, I have to see. Mm-hmm.
And they say the one thing that they look back on is, they don't want to have regrets. They don't want to wonder what if, or I should have done this, or I should have tried that. I should have gone after this thing or that thing. It's like, why would you, you know what I mean? And this is your chance to go after it. So don't wish you had or wonder if you had done it. Just go and do it. So I like that.
And those things, like bringing it back to New Year's resolutions, those type of goals are good. Rather than focusing on your, body and, superficial things like that, making it a goal to conquer your fears in 2024, guys. That's what we need to do.
Yes. I love that. I think that's great. Now, is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to share with the audience? Anything? Any advice, tips, anything?
No, I think, this has just been a great conversation. I think it was a conversation that I needed to have as well, to really focus on, like, what do I want to, accomplish in 2024? And that's really just staying true to myself. And that's something that I really want, our audience to really understand. Being authentically you, I think that I've learned during this process and starting, my podcast, is that can get you so far if you're just authentically yourself. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wow, like, that really makes a difference, huh?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Kristen, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Again, I'll have all of Kristen's podcast and socials linked below, so you can go and check her out and enjoy her content as well. So thank you so much for being on the Piece of Me podcast today.
Yes, and thank you for having me. It was great talking to you.
To be part of the exclusive listener group, hit the follow button on whichever podcast platform you're listening to right now. When you follow, you'll be the first to know about new episodes so you can listen before anyone else. You'll also have quick access to the show, making it convenient to find for the next time. For more free content, join me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and online at peaceofmepodcast.com.